Hello again, everyone, and thank you for listening. Welcome to Ravishly.com's series of interviews with fascinating women from fascinating worlds. I'm Jerry Strauss, and today we have a fantastic guest with us. Her face, her voice, her name, everything about her you've known for quite a while. Many of your favorite movies, many of your favorite TV shows. She's been a part of them all. Her name is Molly Hagan, and she is with us here today. Hi, Molly.
Hi.
Molly, thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us your time. You've been very busy for a long, long time. As we said, we'll run down some of the things that people may know you from. But let's start off right off the bat. You have really gotten back into the forefront of things with, I want to say, dare I say, an edgy new project, something that is a bit different for you career-wise. You're a part of iZombie, which is a new show that's, well, why don't you tell us about it? Tell us about your role on iZombie.
iZombie was created by Rob Thomas. It's taken from a comic book, and I don't know how big the comic book was. I don't know how big the series was. The series of comics that they did for it, but it had a loyal following, and then Rob turned it into a TV show, and it stars Rose McIver, and it's very it's very funny, and if you know Rob at all from Veronica Mars and things like that, it's very funny, but it's also really interesting, and it's a fast-paced, edgy. I just really like the way he writes. It's very, very funny to me, and it's really interesting because of what the lengths Rose goes to. She plays my daughter to cover up that she's a zombie.
And yeah, definitely a show that's got a couple things going for it. And, you know, as you said, the comic book is, to my knowledge, more of a kind of a cult following sort of thing. But
yeah,
these days, really, that doesn't matter. I mean, the biggest movie of the year was Guardians of the Galaxy, which came from a cult comic book. It's really just about the idea and how that can translate to television. And hey, there's nothing hotter over the last 3-5 years in all of pop culture than zombies. So it sounds like a winning formula to me. Rob Thomas, of course, a big winner as well. And that's really cool that you're a part of that. How open were you to the idea of being part of a zombie show, or just generally speaking, when you first heard about it?
Well, you know, I didn't really know much about zombies. What was the first zombie movie? Dawn of the Dead? No, Day of the Dead. What's the first one? The black and white?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, a lot of people.
It's classic, and I didn't even watch that when growing up. So, I didn't know anything about zombies. I didn't know they needed to eat brains to survive. I know nothing, and so I needed work, and I didn't have anything against zombies. But
that's nice.
I didn't know any personally. I can't say, my best friend's a zombie or I have a zombie as a friend. So I didn't really know anything, and I just read what was given to me, and I thought it was really funny. So I wanted to audition for it very badly.
I love the fact that you make the point to let all the zombies out there know that you've got no issues with them. Yeah. If a zombie walked into the room, you wouldn't necessarily walk out, which is a nice.
That's right. It's all.
Well, I mean, before iZombie, people have been watching you for years, of course, part of some classic movies, Some Kind of Wonderful, certainly a major one that I remember. You've been involved in sort of a mix of really mainstream type stuff and then some kind of weird stuff, for the lack of a better term. Is that, by design, some of the, I remember you from Election, and I know you were in a movie called The Dentist, which was definitely more of a subversive horror movie. Do you like being all over the map in your roles?
Well, what's kind of fun now that I'm getting older is it's getting more off the map. It's not just crying mothers and, oh, my baby got kidnapped and stuff like that. There's some actually really substantive or interesting, more interesting stuff. But nothing was by design. I've just a working actor looking for work. I'd love to say, well, I turned down. I mean, I never turn down anything. There are things I'm more proud of than other things. Like I'm really proud of Election. I'm really proud of Some Kind of Wonderful. I'm really proud of Herman's Head. I tend to like things that make you laugh or think than scare you, and that's one of the reasons why I like iZombie, even though there's some suspenseful things in it, and sort of thrilling things in it. To me, the through line is the comedy and the humor that's involved. And so I personally tend to like comedic things rather than horrifying things.
Well, that's kind of the cool place. I mean, even when you think about the whole vampire trend and stuff like that, you see the kind of horrifying films and Twilight and such a drama and such emotional angst and everything. These things morph into... Hello? Can you hear me?
I lost part of your question.
Oh, no, that's okay. We'll cut that. But what I was saying is that when you think about even like vampire stuff, huge trend, films, TV shows, lots of drama, lots of sort of the horrifying stuff that people first think of, but eventually these things tend to morph into sort of a more palatable, entertaining TV product. Kind of like with vampires, they eventually went to the Vampire Diaries. And that was something that was more youth-oriented, a little more lighthearted. And those, once you get to that level, these horror sort of lines of product, if you will, they tend to have nice, long, quality shelf lives. I think the same thing is happening with iZombie. You hit it at just the right part of the trend where there's going to be some staying power for a show like this.
I hope so. But yeah, it's right. Like I think True Blood just taught us that vampires, they're just people. But yeah, I agree that and that's what. I'm interested in the humanity of these monsters. Not that they're monsters, but I mean that's true too. Even of really great monster movies, Frankenstein. It's his humanity, even though he's a reanimated person. So, and I think ultimately that's what makes it interesting. It's not necessarily the terror stuff. It's the humanity involved in these entities that have become monsters. And anyway, that's my opinion.
Well, so let me ask you, Molly, are you prepared if this thing goes the distance, if this show becomes a real hit and becomes part of the lexicon, are you ready to hit the Comic-Con circuit? Because that's what's coming. People are going to be in demand for you for all these conventions all over the country.
They already went to Comic-Con. They already had people go nuts for them, even though nothing had aired and they'd only shot the pilot. I'm sure unless that were to change, and also, age has something to do with whether someone has any fervor for you or not, and I'm not really of the age where people are.
Oh, stop! Of course you are.
Well, no, I mean, come on. No, I would go to Comic-Con. I think I used to personally go to Star Trek conventions to attend. I mean, not to be a part of the convention, but to be, a person in the convention watching the people on stage. I loved that because I was a huge Star Trek fan. So I'm assuming Comic-Con is like that times to the 10th power.
That's very interesting. So you're inherently a sci-fi fan of some sort. Was it limited to Star Trek or just Star Trek?
I really started with Star Trek. It really has to do with Star Trek and generally the original series. But I mean, I also really like the current J.J. Abrams movies a lot also. Mm-hmm. But no, I love the whole world of Star Trek. I loved it. I loved it. Yeah, and anything sort of fantasy, anything that took me. I really like. I like sci-fi. I do like comic book stuff. I thought Guardians of the Galaxy was, I love that movie so much. I love fantasy, so all the Hobbit stuff, because I grew up reading Lord of the Rings. It was my favorite book or trilogy. I like The Hobbit, but Lord of the Rings just, I mean, that's something I kept going back to and back to. I read it first when I think I was 12 or 13, and it just, I never, once a year I read it. So I love anything that takes me out of my current world or anything that I know about the current world. So I love period pieces. So, and anything that takes me out of this realm, I'm pretty much going to be involved in, or I want to be involved in.
Okay. I just want to go back a little bit and ask you about some of the things that people do know you for. Now, there's a story that you have, and if it's okay with you, I'd like you to tell it really quickly about your dealings on one of your first projects ever, Code of Silence. You worked with Chuck Norris, and this is the greatest story in the history of storytelling. So, would you be willing to give us a glimpse of that story?
So embarrassing. Sure. How did I get with you on that when I told you the first time? Okay, so I just got out of college, and I was full of beans, and I thought I knew everything. And but anyway, so I get in this movie. I moved to Los Angeles, and I get in Code of Silence, which shoots in Chicago. So I moved back to Chicago, and I get to be in this movie, and it's a big deal for me. It's a really, really big deal. And I play Diana Luna, who's the daughter of a mafioso guy, and my whole family's been killed, and Chuck Norris ends up having to protect me. And so while he's protecting me, I've just found out my whole family has died, and he's sitting on the bed with me, and he's going to console me. And God, what was he has to do? He's like, I think you should hug her. I think Andy Davis, the director, said, I think you should hug her, and I don't think he wanted to or something. And I, thinking we're just comrades, not knowing how big of a star he was, I went, oh no, if you don't hug me, you'll be an asshole. And all of a sudden the rehearsal stopped, and Mr. Norris left, and I went back to my little trailer or whatever, and I just assumed, oh, well, they're going to light now. But then I get a knock on the door, and Andy comes in, he goes, you need to apologize to Mr. Norris. And I went, what? And he goes, you called him an asshole. I went, oh, no, I called his character an asshole. And he goes, yeah, about that. Mr. Norris is anyway, it was just, so then I tried to apologize. It was just awful. It was just awful. Is that where I left it, or did I tell you?
I think so. Is there more? Is there an addendum here?
But I'll take that off air.
Okay.
So
God.
It was my first time being on a set, and I called the lead actor an asshole.
Yeah.
Inadvertently.
It happens. Now you're making up for it by being nice to zombies. So.
Yeah, that's right. I'm paying my dues.
Exactly. That's a great story, and it just shows you just sort of the challenges of finding your way, no matter who you are, no matter who you're working with at any point during your career. I wanted to ask you because, every interview, every star, every story that they tell, invariably, there's tales of parts that you almost got, things you were considered for that nobody really knew about, well-known things, that nobody gets everything that they audition for, and maybe not everything works out. Did you try out for one of the roles on Friends?
Yes, I did. Jennifer Aniston, she played Rachel, as most of you know. She was committed. She was in the pilot, and but she had 2 shows. So she was in another show, and I can't remember the name of the other show. So they had to recast Rachel because the other show went also, and the other show had first position, and she had they took her in second position for Friends, so they had to replace Rachel. And this is before it started to air. And so I went in and I auditioned for it, and I obviously didn't do very well. And but yeah, I auditioned for Rachel. And then the other series fell away, and so Jennifer got to do Friends. The other show got canceled.
It's just sort of that fantasy thinking of what could have been, and people always go back to that.
Well, no, for me, what could have been was because it was news radio.
Oh, really?
That I had a real shot at. I had a real shot at, and I tanked so badly at network that I tanked. I tanked twice. They had me come back, and I was the only choice. I was the only choice for this particular role, and I tanked. And
wow.
Moira Tierney ended up getting it.
What?
I haven't tanked that badly in a long time.
Wow. Hey, obviously, as you know, you've experienced enough of the highs and the lows to know that you have to have failures in order to experience and enjoy the success.
Oh yeah, but that was the one I was like, because that was so in my control. It was so in my control. The other stuff I didn't have, I wasn't necessarily writing for Rachel. I didn't even go to network. That wasn't. But the other one, I got really close, and it was my fault.
Just to take this into the mindset of it, what do you mean by, were you just, for those of us who aren't in your line of work, what would tanking consist of in this situation?
Well, it was in a specific room at NBC where you go to network and it's the final decision whether they're going to take you or not. And I was the only choice for that role. So right before going in, I looked at this sign on the door or near the door that said, "Actors, please speak up due to air conditioning." So I went, oh, okay, good to know. So I go in, and the room is packed. It's packed with all the executives, from the network and from the series and everything like that. So I go in and I start my thing, and no one's laughing. And in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm not speaking loud enough. So then I was pushing before. Now I'm really pushing. It's like I'm down their throats trying to get them to laugh at whatever I'm doing. It was so awful. It was so awful that even the casting director afterwards, I went, wow, that wasn't so good. He goes, it was not your finest moment.
But it wasn't, I guess what I'm driving at is it wasn't like you just forgot all your lines or anything like that. You made a decision based on what you thought was the right thing to do, and it turned out not to be the right one, but it wasn't necessarily your skill or anything like that. It was just almost fate.
It was my skill, because all the previous auditions are very laid back. I had nailed the character, and this I don't know how to describe pushing. When you're in a room with someone who's just trying too hard.
Oh, sure.
Like someone who's trying too hard to be funny and to be liked and everything like that, and you literally have an aversion to them. That's what I was like in the room. I was trying too hard, so it was awful.
So you were trying to be heard, but you basically stripped away everything that they first liked about you, in a way.
Yes. And for the network, they'd never seen me before. Well, they hadn't seen me for this, but so they were like, "This is who you want? She's horrible." And they were like, "I think you're right. She is." Because that's the other thing. They're testing you to see. Well, I would assume that it's like, how do you handle pressure? And the bottom line is, I didn't handle pressure well at all. So why would they put me in a series?
That's interesting. Do you find that there's a lot of that, just like intentional stuff, just to make situations a pressure cooker for you?
No, I think it's just inherently becomes a pressure cooker. I don't think they intentionally make it a pressure cooker. Do you know what I mean? It just like with every audition, it gets more ramped up until, finally it's the last one, and you have to be able to handle it. It just ends up being a pressure cooker, but it also helps them. Like, well, she can't really handle this.
Do you find that dealing with those inherent pressures is something that you've gotten better at incrementally over the years?
I've gotten better at it just this year.
Just this year. Wow.
taken me. I'm 53. It's taken me being in this particular acting class that I am to finally figure it out.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, that's
just
interesting.
here, I think I have a foolproof thing. Because before it, sometimes I would be incredibly nervous. Sometimes I wouldn't. I had no control over it. And then the older I got, the worse it got. I could even be shaking in the room, like literally shaking.
That's so cool,
and though. You do not book jobs when you shake, unless it's a character that you're shaking.
Yeah, if you're on top of a mountain or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very cool, though. I wanted to talk to you, and I know that, we've already touched on the fact that you have been in the business for a while. You're now, I believe, 53, you said. How do you feel? I mean, I know you said that you actually appreciate some of the different parts that you're being offered as a result of your age. Do you feel like if there's characters that don't necessarily, how do I put it, that aren't necessarily mothers or in a specific age-related role, do you feel like it's become easier over the years to be considered for different types of parts? Do you feel like Hollywood has generally become more open to women who are in their 30s and 40s and 50s to different things?
I don't know, because I don't know what's out there. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I don't know what's auditioning. I only know what I'm auditioning for. Are they more? I mean, still there are more roles written for men than women.
Oh, sure. I just mean like, for instance, we talked before about the Marvel movies and sci-fi shows and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Ming-Na Wen, I believe she's 50 or 51, probably the most kick-ass action star on television right now. That's something that I don't think we've really seen before. So I'm wondering if that's part of just a general trend in, okay, these, in certain situations, these women can be just as right for these parts as, when they were in their 20s.
Oh, yeah. But it's only because of who she is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's who she is.
Yeah, I mean,
is that it's not necessarily the role was written, and then you know what I mean? I'm sure they were like, oh my God, it would be great, is if this, you know what I'm saying? So, but what I think about is like, oh God, it's not, that's not what it's called. Brooklyn 911. What is it? Is it Brooklyn 911?
I think so.
It's a comedy series with, I watch it every week. I should know the name of it. Anyway, there are three major women in that, in the precinct. And so I think about that. And then Kira Sedgwick just showed up as a recurring character. So I think of that. It's a really big cast, and three of them are women, and all three of them have. And so I think in terms of that, like, well, that's pretty bad. And went, all right, two of them are cops. One of them, is an administrator, sort of a secretary in it or whatever. But they're all really great roles. They're all really funny, and I'm not sure that 5 years ago they would have had that. So yeah, maybe, yeah, I agree with you.
Okay. I don't remember what my opinion was, but I'm glad you agree with me.
Your opinion is, are there more roles for, well, you said of a certain age, but I just went to women in general. Do you think Hollywood is thinking outside the box in terms of women being cast in other things that may have been traditionally, didn't really matter what the sex was? Okay,
right.
I paraphrase.
That's okay. You did a fantastic job. I know you haven't really been focused necessarily on your acting career over the last several years. I know that you were involved in yoga and opening up your own yoga situation. And just tell us a little bit about that. I know that you have a huge passion for yoga to the point that you wanted to make it basically your life and your line of work. How was that experience for you looking back on it, and where does yoga fit into your life now?
Well, now yoga fits into my life as a personal practice, and I'm getting to do it more ever now that I'm not teaching. Um, I this kind of piggybacks on what I thought roles for women were, for my age, were diminishing, and so I thought I better come up with something else that I can make a living at. And so, starting in like '99, starting in '96, I started studying to teach. I had already been part of a particular practice since I think '87. So in '96, I started to study to teach. And it was just like a little avocation, but it started taking up more and more of my life, this idea of teaching and getting students. Even though I didn't have a lot of students, it was still very part of my life, and I was still very committed to the small amount of students that I had. And then to the point where I wasn't really getting any roles, or I felt I wasn't getting any roles, and I went, okay, this is it. I'm going to do it full time. I'm going to open a studio. If I keep getting acting gigs, that's great, but whatever. And so I put all my energy and time into the studio, and it wasn't particularly successful, but in order to make it work, it was on my mind, and every little piece of extra energy I had went to how can I make this work. So I even turned down auditions. So I turned down auditions to try to make this thing work, and eventually my agency dropped me. And I would have dropped me too, because I was turning down auditions. My focus was completely somewhere else. It looked and seemed like I never wanted to act again. And when this happened, I went, what am I doing? What do I really want to do? And although I liked teaching, I'd rather be acting. So I made the decision to close the studio and devote all my time to acting again. But if my agency had not dropped me, I would not have come to that decision. And since that time, I have basically worked nonstop. I also put myself into an acting class again. It was like a perfect storm of stuff happening. I got into a particular acting class with a friend of mine who I really liked. His name is Stuart Rogers, and then it changed. Now, am I a series regular on something? Well, no, but I'm working enough that I can pay my bills, that I did not have to declare bankruptcy, that if I would have had to, if I continued with the studio. I would have had to declare bankruptcy.
You're on a great path. You took a chance. I mean, all right, here's what I think is really cool, and that I think a lot of people can learn from, just from hearing your stories, is that, you know, you had said before, you know, I need to change my path because I think this line of work is drying up for me.
Right.
But I think a lot of women, once they get to a certain age or a point in life, or even looking ahead, think, well, past this point, there's nothing for me. I can't do anything new with my life. I can't learn anything. I can't change. And clearly, you know, that's all irrelevant to you. I mean, you're still learning in your craft. You're still, you know, you've just peaked because you've just figured out how to audition.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, you're just right now hitting your stride because you've kept yourself open to becoming better, just in every way. So I think that's pretty cool that now you're in a better place from that perspective than you've ever been.
Well, I really believe that. I'm having as much fun now as I did in my 20s in acting. Like, I thought the sky was the limit when I was in my 20s. I did, you know, there was no sense of like, I'm not going to make it. And making it isn't necessarily becoming a star in my mind. Making it is, you know, having a career. And so I'm as excited now as I was in my 20s. And I really lost that excitement because I bought into the idea that there are only a few roles left. I'm not getting them. And that's not true. Things are open. There is more possibilities to act now than there ever has been before because of all the stuff online, because, you know, Amazon's got new content. I mean, all the stuff on cable. There's all these cable things that have, you know, their own content now. There's so much content now, and they need actors for it. So I see more opportunity now than there ever was before, and I was in and it was a mindset. My mindset was there's no opportunities. It's not happening. I have to quit. And the only thing that has changed is my mindset. The only thing.
And that's all that you needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of it was just taking stock of where I was at that time and like, what am I grateful for right now? Because when you're in a hole of negativity, you're not going to get jobs. You're not going to, and the only way to crawl out is to just think of at least one thing you can be grateful for, one thing that you have hopes for. And it's really hard when you're really depressed or you're really negative. It's really hard to climb out of that hole and even come up with one thing. But it's imperative because you won't get out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's amazing. We're seeing you again on TV on iZombie. We're going to be seeing a lot more of you probably in all different kinds of projects in the years to come. One final question for you. You touched on Amazon and all the different digital outlets where you can get programming and content now. And, of course, that's going to include probably most of your entire body of work. We're talking all the films you've been in. We're talking, of course, your appearances people remember you from on Seinfeld, on Friends, on so many different shows. If Herman's Head's not available, it should be, and hopefully it will be, because that's binge TV in the making, if I've ever heard it. Yeah, come on, who wouldn't want a weekend of Herman's Head? Just straight wall-to-wall Herman's Head. But I want to ask you, I mean, how do you feel about, first of all, how do you feel about the fact that everything that you've done or will do now will probably pretty much live on forever and be accessible with the click of a remote control?
Well, I think it's really great. I hope that there's things in place that we get some sort of residuals out of it. But, it's interesting looking back and seeing a younger version of yourself. Someone just gave me an 8x10 of me, a photograph from a play I did in Chicago, so I was like 21 maybe. And I look at this photograph, and it's astonishing to me. I can see all the, I can just see in my face, like the sky's the limit. I see all this ambition. And I just look at this person who I'm not anymore. I'm somebody else, but it's so watching yourself on whatever the thing is, as a younger version of yourself, it's really humbling, but it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see where you've come from. So actors have a real have a one up on other people in terms of they can actually see where they've come from in their life. They can sort of track the course of their life through some of the stuff they've done, and it's I think it's fascinating.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and humbling and sometimes horrifying and sometimes like, I can't, oh my God, or whatever. But it's ultimately really interesting. But I got rid of all my Herman's Head tapes because I thought, well, they're deteriorating. I don't have anything to play on them anymore. I don't have a VHS. I literally threw them away. So I have no record of that. And that's fine.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So they have to be on YouTube somewhere, I'm sure.
They are, but the quality is very degraded.
Well, okay. Here's hoping Netflix, Hulu, somebody. If you're not currently offering the entire collection, start to finish of Herman's Head. Come on, television iconic history right there. But along those lines, let's almost use this as a time capsule to finish this off. Just looking at your career so far, not counting everything that we're seeing now and will be seeing in the future, if you wanted to show people 3 different things that you've done in your career to sort of encapsulate your career thus far, what would those 3 things be?
Well, they wouldn't necessarily, for me, it wouldn't be for other people. Are you talking for other people how it encapsulate, or what encapsulates it for me in terms of my own?
For you. I mean, if someone who wasn't familiar with you, but you want to show your stuff.
One of the first things I did was a TV show with Harvey Korman and Cloris Leachman, and it was Alan Spencer was the executive producer. And are you still there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jerry? Oh, okay, so there was a beep. And it was called The Nut House. And that was the first sitcom. And that was like an extraordinary thing for me. Then Travel in Time, probably Herman's Head. And then there's this other movie that really meant, three? They all really meant a lot to me. But the things that no one really knows about are something called Ringmaster. Ringmaster is a bawdy little film, but it meant a lot to me because this character was so other than me that it was really exciting. So that. Oh, and then there's this thing I just did with Zac Efron, and I got to tell you, I only worked on it a day. It was revelatory for me. One, because he's a great guy, and that's We Are Your Friends. I think that's
okay.
We Are Your Friends, and that's an independent film. I don't know when that's going to be released, but that was a high point. That was a real high point for me, and that was just like a couple months ago.
That's great. So, yeah, look for that, people. Look for iZombie, of course, on your TV listings. And look for a lot more to come from Molly in the weeks, the months, and the years to come. She's going to be all over the place. What's left for you? Let's think. You've done horror. You've done comedy.
I want to do a period piece. I want to do a period piece. I want to have to wear costumes.
Okay.
I want to wear costumes, and I want to speak either in a Western accent or a British accent. That's what I want to do.
All right, people out there listening, let's make it happen. Let's get some sort of social media petition. And by the way, before we get out of here, what's your involvement on social media? How can people follow you and, cyber stalk you and all that good stuff, see what you're up to?
Just my name on Twitter. I think that's how it goes. It's at Molly Hagan, and so there's nothing in it. It's just at Molly Hagan, and Hagan is spelled Hagan, and they can follow me there. And then I have a website, mollyhagan.com. That's pretty easy.
Okay, so let's do a hashtag Make Molly Hagan British and get that going. Twitter. The actual specific period we're shooting for, that's all up for grabs. But somehow we've just got to make her British in some walk of life.
Yes. Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, Molly, hopefully next time we speak to you, you'll be speaking to us with some sort of an accent.
Yes.
And then we'll know we've done our job. But thank you so much for joining us here on ravishly.com.
Thank you so much, Terry. I appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you later.